All right, we're recording, and I've got Claire Taylor with me, the astounding Claire Taylor that I've been obsessing over your YouTube videos for like the last week and a half. So,
oh, great.
Yeah, so it's you're like, oh, that's not scary at all. So quick bio for those listening that don't know who you are, which I'm sure is very few. You've written over a dozen top-selling humor novels. You are an editor who has banked over 200 editing manuscripts, which is admirable and quite amazing. You run a small empire out of fsmedia.com, which is a site I totally recommend everybody go check out. That's where I started finding your YouTube videos on the Enneagram, which is what we're going to talk about. You're also the co-host of Sell More Books Show, and you have a very profound Kickstarter going right now, which is why I stalked you and rushed you onto the show, because I wanted all the dialoguers to be able to participate in the Kickstarter if they want to. So did I miss anything in your bio that I should have?
No, I don't know. I mean, side projects pop up and die. So I don't worry too much about it. I think you hit the main points.
Okay. Yeah. If we all listed all of our side projects, the bio for like the whole show, and then we'd be like, all right,
that's it, folks.
That's it. So meet Claire. See you later. So I wanted to talk to you about the Enneagram. I didn't just flat out stalk you. One of the members of my community.
It's okay if you did.
That's okay.
I've designed my business to be very stalkable.
Way to go. Yeah. I mean, no better way to go viral, right, than to make yourself something that somebody wants to stalk. So one of the members of the community knows I have a mild obsession with the Enneagram, and like 2 weeks ago reached out to me and was like, hey, did you see that Claire is doing all these videos in the Enneagram? I was like, no. So I watched all of them in a weird blast through and really enjoyed them. So I thought I'd bring you on to talk about it. And I've honestly been waiting I've been surprised with all of the author services that pop up that there aren't more like author services around the Enneagram, because it feels like the perfect tool for authors to me. So I was really excited to see that you're venturing and have been venturing into that world. So let's start with just your story around the Enneagram. How'd you get into it? How did you find it? Like that, all that kind of.
Well, I was mistyped at an early age.
So. Ooh, nice.
No, I mean, my mother and my sister got into it when I think I was in high school, and they got into it like through some workshop at the Episcopal church that they went to.
Interesting.
And so they kind of came at it from, because there's multiple ways you can come at the Enneagram. You can come from more the psychological or the more religious, the spiritual. So they kind of came at it from that, and they guessed my type, and they guessed 3 wrong ones. And then unknown at the time, I was very misunderstood as a child.
That's
clearly.
That's hysterical. What did they guess? I'm just curious.
They guessed 3, 4, and 8 for me.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. And which is something. Okay. So I didn't actually do this. The Enneagram is a personality typing system that has 9 different personality types. Right. Each type has a wing. You wing left or right, and it also has a scale of like health to unhealth, and it focuses on motivations and fears of each personality type. Right. Now that I got that out of the way. The dialogue is, you go read it. Go read it.
The primer. I know. Yeah. So they had me take a test, and then I tested and actually got the wrong type again, it turns out. But I was still in my teens, and it can be really hard to test and type at that point. Yeah. And I was still in my family system where I had to take on a role of one of my wings. So I was testing as that wing, it turned out. But
interesting.
Long story short, I kind of forgot about it for a little while. And then I got into this writing mastermind with 6 other authors, and we've been meeting for, I think, 7 years now. But we started talking about it, and then we all knew each other's types. It helped bond the group because we understood where each person was coming from. We understood. Yeah. So it just became the language that we spoke. And then as I was writing, my own fiction, I started using it because I was like, well, let's just why wouldn't I? Like, what is the type of this character? What am I going to, And I think I started using it like maybe like 3 books into one of my 7-book series. And so then I kind of was like, oh, well, I'm like, I didn't nail it in the first 3 books, but I'm going to kind of like course correct. I'm going to aim this ship a little bit more towards the type that I think this character is, so I was having kind of massage it. And so I know when I talk to a lot of authors about this, they're like, oh, but like, I'm already on book 5. I'm like, girl, I get it. Like we can still make this work.
Mhm.
And they'll just be like, oh, this character develops so well. Oh, your writing's improving. Like no readers care. So I started working it into my own writing. And then it was just this thing where, my friends would call me because I do have all that editing experience and I did a lot of developmental edit and stuff. So friends would call me for little story problems and we'd start talking. And then I'd be like, okay, so this is going to sound weird, but there's this thing called the Enneagram. And I think your character is this type. And so that means that in this situation, you're actually imposing your own motivation on the character instead of the character's motivation. And that's probably where things are getting sticky. So I started using it just sort of with friends. And then I was like, I got to I only have so many hours in the day. Maybe I can extend this to more people and maybe I can make this like a service. So it kind of developed that way. And then I've just been using it. And my husband is ready for me to have an outlet for it. He was more than ready for me to have an outlet for it. I think maybe like season 5 of Game of Thrones, he was like, please, he's very kind about it.
Please stop typing the characters on TV. Please stop.
Yeah, but I'm like, come on, this is the perfect journey for that character. Anyway, so it just basically became an obsession. Like, you have that obsession, I had that obsession, and it just formed in this way. So then I've been doing the story alignments, is what I call the one-on-one calls with authors. Nice. I've been doing story alignments with authors for a few years now. And the author alignment was just another thing that came up. We kept talking about story and people were like, well, how does this fit into this? And is this the story I want to be writing? And I'm like, well, let's look at your core motivations and let's see, what is driving you to write the story in the first place, and have you jumped onto someone else's core motivation? So that was a whole thing. And I've been working on this book for a while and I finally have it ready because I kept shelving it to do fiction and then coming back to it. And so I thought, let's kickstart it because everything that I offer pretty much goes along with it. So that's how I ended up where I am today.
Very cool. Okay. I want to go back to some of the things you talked about and then come back to story alignment and the book again. So first, talk to me, would you mind sharing with us your type and kind of just so people can get kind of a feel for I'll go first. I'm a 6. I was also mistyped. I learned about the Enneagram from a very aggressive pastor who really, really, really wanted to type me. So he actually took me out. I didn't even know what the name was. He took me out for coffee. I thought we were just going to hang out. And he had his like profiling test there. And he was trying to figure out which profile I was, which for a 6, which is fear-based. So as a 6 on the Enneagram, I'm kind of a little afraid of everything. And I have a committee in my head that is constantly weighing options and directions of how things are supposed to go. 6s tend to be very anxious people, which I definitely am. So to have somebody like try to force Enneagram type me at the moment was like my worst nightmare. So, but after he did that, I went and I was like, oh, this is an interesting thing. And my wife got into it. I brought it home to her. I was like, hey, maybe we should, like, this sounds interesting. Maybe we should talk about this. So she got into it. She had always felt very out of place in the world. And as she typed herself, really resonated with the 8 and was like, oh, this is why I'm a very strong female 8. So 8s are extremely justice oriented, very passionate about things being fair, and really thrive in a fight, in a debate. And so
it's hard to be a type 8 woman.
It's very hard. Yeah. She really struggled being a type 8 woman. But once she was able to kind of put some words to it, it helped her, helped us to understand each other because, she always wanted to know which direction I wanted to go. And my answer was always, as a 6, there's really no black or white, like everything's gray. And for me, it's all about the community and who I'm around. So it's like, hey, whatever way you go, I'll go. Like, I don't care what way we go, as long as we go that direction together. So for us, it helped us understand each other as well. That like, oh, this is why you keep picking fights that terrify me. 6. And this is why I don't tend to show up until you're in a fight. And then I show up because I'm there with you the whole time. I don't care which fight we pick, as long as we pick a fight together. Right. Like, so
Yeah.
it helped us kind of get that like understanding of like each other. And then moving on, like I have 5 children, 3 teenagers and an almost teenager and then a little. And it's helped them, like we've talked to them about like, we read the book with one of the books. I can't remember which one we read. The Journey to You, maybe. I don't remember.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we
That's
read one of the books with them and was like, hey, this is a tool for self-understanding to like help you process who you are. So anyway, those are my types. Where do you fall on that?
Well, you did say something that I think is really important that people understand, which is that the Enneagram is a language system. It's a way for people to communicate with each other and with themselves. And that's really the whole benefit of it, is that once you have the language, you can understand it. And so people without the language and not really understanding how certain themes or topics manifest in healthy versus unhealthy ways don't see the warning signs. So it's that language that really gets me. But so
I think just to jump in on that, as an author, like we talk about on this podcast all the time, having diverse character voices in your cast, and how like your cast needs to complement and contrast each other to build like conflict within discussion and dialogue. So I find the Enneagram a really helpful tool in having a language that helps me understand my characters. So like using that language to speak to my characters is super helpful too. Sorry though, I cut you off.
No, it's good. I was just going to say, so my type is 1. I'm a type 1 with a 2 wing.
Nice.
Yeah. Not all the time, but I'll take it. Yeah. So I'm the reformer for people who aren't familiar with it. And I think a 1 with a 2 wing is called the advocate or something like that, but there are different names for it, but mainly I'm a type 1. When I was living with my family of origin still, I looked more like a type 9 because I was the peacemaker of the family. So I had to sort of reach into that wing and do that sort of thing. Yeah. So the 9s are the peacemakers. So it's now a role that I hate being in because it's not really my wing. Like I can do it. I can be diplomatic for the sake of being fair, but it just takes a little bit more out of me.
It feels like you're wearing somebody else's shoes.
Yes. Yeah. It's a skill that I know how to do very well, but I'm much more into that 2 helper wing. Nice. So I'm a 1 and my husband is a 9. So he's the peacemaker. Yeah. So it's funny you telling these stories. I think every couple needs to know their types.
It's really helpful.
It's such a light bulb moment because that man will not argue with me. Yeah. And I cannot get him to argue. He's a 9 with a 1 wing. Okay. Which is sometimes called the negotiator. And he's a police officer, but he's also like a negotiator. So he'll go to the hostage situations and do the negotiations. And he's naturally good at it. Like he just kind of was like, oh, this is the thing I'm doing. He's great at de-escalation because you can't get mad at the guy.
Yeah, and you can't rattle the 9.
It drives me crazy.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, well, I've given you plenty of practice on that hostage negotiation thing. You know how to talk someone off off the edge there. But so it is really funny, but it works well. I think the 9-1 pairing, we make it work really well because my self-judgment is like enough for the both of us, and he doesn't judge at all. So I think that's probably why that pair works for me. So that's I had to learn as a reformer. And actually type 1 is my top score, is always the top score, but I have a very high 8 in there. So there's a lot of 8-ishness in me. I'm not really the like super clean type 1, like the everything's got to be organized and everything. Yeah. It's more of socially focused 1. So I see the problems in society, and those are the things I want to go fight for. So I like when I see, injustice or just something that is wrong and needs to be fixed, I'm very vocal about it. And I don't care, like really if I make friends or not, I'm like, are you going to like support my cause or not? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Like I can get in that crusader mindset of, which is very similar to the 8, but it's, you know, a little bit different motivation.
Yeah.
It's coming from just a little bit different of a place of like, why don't you guys do the right thing? And why don't you agree with me on what the right thing is?
Now, do you have that type 1 inner critic? Because like as a 6, I have the inner committee where I have like 7 voices talking all the time. So I'm never real certain about anything.
Yeah, I have an inner critic that I've had to do a lot of work with. It's not so bad anymore.
That's good.
Yeah, like I hear it. I don't not hear it, right? But I've done a lot of this Enneagram work and I hear it and I go, thank you. I know you're trying to prevent me from, you know, doing the wrong thing, but we're good. We're good.
I have the same relationship with my inner committee. I'll be like, hey, thanks guys. Thanks for all the advice. Thanks for all the, like, you actually have to pick a direction, but thank you for all the, which I think is interesting.
Like being the head writer.
Yeah, right. Like it's like, this was a great writer's room. Thank you for all the input. But I think the interesting difference between a 1 and an 8, because they are that both like, they can both be that like very determined, very direction focused, is that my wife has no inner critic. She's just, she trusts her gut 100% and never questions it. And it's it's that interesting dynamic.
The fun thing with the 1s is we have a really strong gut, but because we don't want to do the wrong thing, we don't want to go against our morals, we shoot that you know, gut instinct straight up into our head to justify it. And so we look like head types and like the thinking types so much because we're sitting there like we're not reacting. It's like, I don't know how many times when I was younger, I was called intimidating, but it's just poker face because we don't react too hard because we're afraid we're going to react the wrong way. And then we'll be a bad person and, you know, et cetera, et cetera.
You'll fail in some way, which makes your inner critic just die on the inside.
Exactly. So that's something I've had to work on is like, okay, people might want to see your reaction in real time, Claire. And like you know, for the type 1, I think the best thing I ever did was learn how to give a good apology. And once I felt confident in my ability to apologize genuinely to heal harm as much as I could, then I could kind of go around, you know, a little bit more of a wrecking ball without worrying about, you know, doing some transgression that could never be repaired.
Interesting. Yeah. I think for a 6, for me, besides kind of taming my inner committee, I think the constant fear of the future has been really something that I've really had to work on and like not allowing that to paralyze me. And it's funny, my older son, who is 19, we were reading the book and we didn't even think he was paying attention as we were listening to it on an audio tape as we were driving in the car. And they get to the place where they start describing the 6, and he just started kind of laughing. And so we paused the book. I was like, you relating to this? He's like, oh yeah. So because of trauma when I was a teenager, I tend to be a counterphobic 6, which means if something, most 6s get paralyzed by fear, but if something scares me, I have the need to touch it.
Fight rather than flight, sort of.
Right. Yeah. Like fight or flight or hug. I tend to hug things that scare me. But my son is definitely the more like normal 6 where he like paralyzes in fear. And so it's been interesting having him kind of type himself and helping him understand that like, hey, your anxiety doesn't need to master you today. That like this is your deliberative qualities are good, but you also have to like be in control of them, not let them control you. Kind of like you're talking about with your inner critic, that, you know, having that self-understanding to like better function in the world.
Right. And I think the thing that 6s can benefit from learning, and I'm sure you've gone through this too, is that the more afraid you are, the more opportunity for courage, because the amount of courage in a situation is directly related to how much you're afraid. If it doesn't scare you, it doesn't take courage. So it's, you know, that realization. And, you know, when you're writing a type 6, their hero's journey, you're going to be like, they're looking for this elixir of courage. And so it's, you know, it's a bigger opportunity. And I think that every type has a really cool opportunity in that way by overcoming that sticking point. But it, you know, in real life, it's a sticking point all the time.
And let me pause here to say, for anybody listening, Claire, you and I we're just kind of rolling through numbers and names, and because we've both read this stuff. It may sound complicated listening to us to grasp onto. It is not. It is not like, I think what helped me with the Enneagram is, for writing specifically, because I want to transition into how you use this with fiction and then talk about what you're doing with a writer motivations. For writing specifically, looking at like the Myers-Briggs, where there's a gazillion different personality types, it can be very hard to master outside of your own personality. Or, I had worked with a lot of authors who use StrengthsFinder to build their personality types, I love StrengthsFinder. It's an amazing system. Becca Syme is amazing. Please don't come for me. No, I love StrengthsFinder so much. But there's a gazillion different combination types, which is fantastic for self-understanding, but very difficult when you're trying to combine and match personalities. Part of what's nice about the Enneagram is that there's just 9 types. So you can get a grasp on like 2 or 3 of them for your characters and roll with that, which is great. That's what I like about it for writers. So talk to me a little bit, when you coach a writer in using the Enneagram for writing, how do you feel the Enneagram can most help a writer create their characters in their fiction?
Well, I think that the most important thing is to know your protagonist's Enneagram type, because that drives the story. And it's going to inform you on both what the theme might be, what a natural theme for that character might be, and how that protagonist is going to interact with the theme. So really knowing what their type is, so what their motivation is, why they do the things they do, not necessarily what they do, but why they do them, is going to give you a hint as to what their starting worldview is. At the very start of the story, they're going to have some faulty worldview, some faulty belief that maybe served them when they were younger, but no longer serves them. And that is going to be a belief almost always when you're building a really, really strong and effective story. It's going to be based around their core fear and their core desire. So it would be a belief on the theme that they have that's related to their core desire. So you start to triangulate that. And you can go, okay, maybe we have, let's say, a type 6. We'll just go with your type. So you have a type 6 protagonist, and they may have a belief that being close to powerful people will keep them safe. Right. And that's that type.
He is the desire. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the type 6 need for that sort of external security, or the desire for security and safety, but looking for it externally. So then you can guess that your inciting incident of the story is going to be something that upsets or disproves that, faulty belief. So that could be that the person who they are, seeking security from turns on them, betrays them. That is a big transgression for a 6. That is world shattering, to have that betrayal, because the 6 is focused on social, connection and security in the community. So then they have to go, where do I get security from them? Where is safe? And that is the bulk of the story, right? Them figuring out where is safe. And
discover that safety. Yeah.
Yeah. It's going to be the undercurrent of the entire story. And you can put that in space. You can put that in the, Wild West. You can put that in like a hospital drama. You can put that anywhere, really. Yeah. It's genre free.
Yeah. Character change has nothing to do with it.
Right.
The setting in which the story takes place. Yeah.
Right. So that's how I would focus first, is making sure that we have that protagonist aligned to the inciting incident, and what the rising action is going to be based on, what they need to learn along the way, what hard knocks they need to take, what worldview they might adopt that could be faulty that they have to then again reevaluate, and what decision they need to make in the climax. So that's all informed by your protagonist's type, or it can be if you use this method. And the really strong stories, when you start to pick them apart, you realize they're doing this. So once they're deconstructed, whether or not the author was using the Enneagram and knew it, or not, because usually it's not, but it's a very, instinctual sort of thing.
Yeah, there are certain stories that I read or watch, and I'm like, oh, that author does
Yeah.
we just finished Ozark, and I swear the writer of that understands Enneagram on a deep level, because that, well, maybe it's because I think the lead couple's a 6 and an 8 that I really relate to. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I like what you're saying about using the Enneagram to find that like character, deep desire, and then like looking for the fault, the wound that needs to be healed through the character journey as the character builds out. And I will say something we talk about a lot on this podcast is taking your vehicle character, your protagonist, and partnering them with an engine, with a like side character that's going to encourage them. So like another way that the Enneagram allows you to diversify that is by like, if you're taking that 6 and taking them through a journey of losing security and finding security in a new way, knowing that like, man, that's a great heroine's journey book where like the 6 is going to gather a family around them, making sure that the other characters they're gathering, you aren't writing as 6s, right? Like that you're pulling an 8 in there that's like super mission focused and driven. You're pulling a 5 in there that's like very like thinking, knowledge, so that you're building this diverse cast around your 6 as they go on this journey of self-understanding in order to like build out that the dynamic nature of the cast around you, which is
you definitely want to have Enneagram diversity in your story, because any pairing of types is going to have a natural understanding on a level and a natural conflict on a level. And so depending on what you need, you can say, okay, the 6 needs to learn how to trust when someone wants to nurture them. Maybe we're going to take a type 2, the helper, and bring them in as a side character to, because the helpers really they overlap with the 6s in that they are so other focused and they want to give to other people and create that security through giving.
Yeah.
So, that might be a good, helpful character, but then you also want to think of what antagonist is really going to hit that wound. And you can figure that out by, looking at the Enneagram type and saying, what journey are they going on? A 6 who has really been, who's been betrayed and let down. Their antagonist could be someone who's more of a loner. 6s are really attracted to type 8s because 8s give that natural authority. Right. So, it can be very healthy, right? Because 8s are unwilling to open up a lot to many people, and they will sense the loyalty of the 6s and say, this is someone I can trust. And then the 6s will say, this is someone who knows their inner authority, which is something that the 6s struggle with. So it can be a really interesting pairing until the 8s do something that betrays that, or
until the 8s become a monster. And then, but see, what's great about that 6-8 pairing in literature and in story is that the 6 is so loyal, they stick with the monster, even though the monster, they know the monster's terrible, because it's the community that's more important.
Right. Or they do the thing where if they're so low, they find another authority figure that seems to have more power and more security. And then they'll do that little betrayal thing, because in our low versions of ourselves, we do the one thing we hate the most. Right. So like as a 1, unhealthy 1s are hypocrites. They become hypocrites and do the thing that they've been persecuting and railing against. So you can do that if you're going to have like a 6 antagonist. You don't really want to do that with a protagonist, because it's very hard to keep them sympathetic.
Yeah, totally.
But so those are the main ways I would say, like protagonist, and then aligning them with a good antagonist. And like you said, some sort of ally that can be almost the mentor figure.
Just for to show people listening how the diversity of this can work, let's do another number and take their like fear and character journey on a passion as well. You can pick whatever number you want.
Let's do, I don't know. What do you think a lot of your writers are? What type would you say?
That's really hard. Let's not do what I think a lot of my writers are, but let's do what I think a lot of my writers write.
Okay.
Because the popular character we write right now is the lone wolf, is the like isolating, and I think it's a number 1. Like, there's a firm sense of right and wrong. There's also a deep sense of self-doubt. And there's a lot of like pushing people away who don't fit the model of, so do a 1.
Okay. All right. We can definitely do it.
Is that a fair, do you think that's a fair connection?
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's really in line with the zeitgeist right now. I mean, the new Batman, strong type 1. And, I loved that movie because it's that moral gray area that ones struggle with. But once reformers can be more comfortable there, they can really tap into this wisdom and understanding and balance through letting go rather than controlling. But yeah, so a type 1, so you're going to have this wrong and right. And type 1s really don't want to cause harm. So a good inciting incident for a type 1 reformer protagonist would be something like they thought they were doing the right thing, and then they found out that they just caused a lot of harm. That is going to be a very big thing. And that quest might be something like, righting the wrongs, or it could be one of, just inner recovering and forgiveness, or trying to fix things and making things worse for a little bit and saying, maybe I can't control this situation. Maybe it's someone else's job to fix this. So those are the kinds of things that are really going to trigger a type 1. So then if you have a journey or a quest of the type 1 where they are trying to make amends. So in the Batman, it's not so much Bruce Wayne trying to make amends for himself, but he's trying to fix this corruption. And the corruption and type 1 go together just naturally because type 1's core fear is of being corrupt or bad. So when they see corruption, they want to seek and destroy. That's a big thing. And part of it is a distraction from the fear that reformers themselves are corrupt. So the reformer wants to go do all the things. And maybe if the exterior world is perfect, then they don't have to worry about what's going on inside them. So you see him trying to fix this corrupt system all on his own, lone wolf, like you said. If people want to help him, they can help him. If, Selena, right, wants to help him.
Yeah.
As long as she's helping him, they're good. When she has her own ideas, he's like, what are you doing? We're on a crusade together. I thought you were in this. And she just has completely different motivations, which they did really, really well.
Yeah, they did.
And then he starts to figure out that maybe there is some part of his legacy that is corrupt. And that is going to be a big trigger point for him. That's kind of the turning point where he then can't just, be his like broody into his stress number type 4 self. But he has to, kind of go and reckon with this. And so, I mean, that movie just nails the type 1, like the really self-punishing inner critic. Bruce Wayne doesn't like himself in that movie. That's not even part of it. It's not even a consideration.
No.
He's like, who cares if I like myself? I got to go fix all this stuff.
Yeah.
So that's a really good one. As far as like a type 1, an antagonist type 1, have you seen There Will Be Blood?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So for anyone who's seen that, or who hasn't seen it, it's Daniel Day-Lewis is playing this oil man, opposite Paul Dano, who is a, just small church preacher.
Yeah.
And they have a lifelong blood feud, and the 1-8 showdown, and nobody's really likable, right? Yeah. Like it's an anti-hero story. So the showdown between the 1 and the 8 of like the power versus the righteousness, I can't take my eyes off of it. Yeah. I have watched that 3-hour movie probably 20 times because it's so good. Awesome. But yeah, so that's how you can do a nice type 1 antagonist if you want to do something like that, which is sort of the persecutor or the self-righteous rather than, actually righteous, but like self-righteous persecutor or crusader, less of the caped crusader and more of like, European Crusades crusader.
Yeah.
That sort of dynamic is all within the 1. So you can, choose how you want to use it.
Yeah. I'd say a 1-6 antagonist pairing is good too. because there's that black and white nature of the 1, and then everything's great with the 6. It's a good kind of, it can lead to some really great dialogue around what's right, what's wrong, right?
Yeah,
Because the
and the
6 is never
6,
going to believe that anything is actually righteous. There's
and they can both get in each other's heads.
Yep. Yeah.
Real easy.
Yeah. So for those listening, even if you don't like, even if you're not going to go master the Enneagram today, what's wrong with you? But if you're not, you know, I hope part of what you're hearing is that like finding that character pain and then developing your plot through that character pain and understanding like, oh, you know, these are the plot points I need to pull this character from one space to another.
Exactly.
I hope you can walk away with that, even if you aren't willing to go like check out the Enneagram, that understanding that like movement. Now, Claire, you had a video on using the Enneagram for dialogue too.
Yeah.
Which I loved, which was really, really great. In the dialogue community, we talk about the personality being the stem of your character's daisy, and that voice, the character, the personality blooms into that character voice, which we break down in words, body language, cadence, and pacing. And that kind of like, here's how the voice works. So just to like give a little preface before I ask you to talk about this for the people listening, when we talk about using the Enneagram to build a character voice, we're talking about giving that base personality that then is going to bloom into how the character voice, which is what the reader perceives the character voice to inform what the personality is. So talk to us a little bit about how you go about looking at a type and figuring out how that type should sound to a reader.
Yeah, well, a lot of this, I didn't do this work myself. This is stuff that I found about talk styles. So if you search Enneagram talk styles or speech styles, you can find some of the other work on it. So this is just how
I'm going to go do that because I've actually never searched it.
Yeah. So those are the keywords for those who want to do some self-study.
Nice.
And so each of these talk styles is a result of this core fear and core desire. So should I just go through the numbers? Because I'll just go all around.
I want to have time to talk about what you're doing with the Kickstarter. So just pick 2.
Okay, I'll give an example. So
and let's do 2 that we haven't done. So do a 2.
Okay.
Do a number 2.
Okay, a 2. I'll do a 2 and a 3. How about that?
Yeah, that's great.
So type 2 is the helper. Their core fear is being unworthy of love, and their core desire is to be worthy of love. It's all about unconditional love for type 2s. So when they're not in their highest level, that need for unconditional love turns into an act of conditional love. They see the world through conditional love. They think that all the love they receive is conditional upon what they can offer, essentially. So that's why they're called the helpers. They help, they help, they help. They have a hard time asking for help a lot of the times because that's a subtraction of what they're adding to the world, right? So their talk style is advising and supportive. So they are trying to give helpful advice. They are trying to convey information that would make their mind and their presence more valuable to you so that, they can add a tally mark to the worthy of love column, and they're going to be very supportive. So they're going to be friendly. They can, sort of slide into placating, or even flattering people because they're trying to hope that they earn some of that love back. So that's the type 2, advising or supportive. Type 3.
So if I take a second, like for the dialogue or language, like, what you're describing is like cadence and pacing are really important for that character, because in pacing, they're going to listen and then respond. So 2 is rarely going to start the conversation, but is definitely going to be highly engaged as the conversation goes on. And for that cadence, you're looking for like 2 to 3 sentences per utterance. You're looking for a lot of like balance with like a 1-sentence question. So you want them like asking questions and then coming back with that like 2 to 3 sentence cadence. And then body language for 2, you want a lot of like touching, a lot of like affirmative touching, like, showing concern and empathy through their body language. And with those words, you really want to bring out that like focus on others, right? Like 2s are very uncomfortable talking about themselves. So you get that like, Yeah.
Right.
Sorry, just to use the like dialogue or
Oh yeah, no,
language for
that's
our listeners.
perfect. Yeah. And twos have such a gift at anticipating needs because this is
Mhm.
something that is their top priority. So they will anticipate the needs. They'll already know they'll tell people what they're feeling.
Yeah.
They won't ask. They'll just say, you look blah, blah, blah. Like you
Mhm.
seem blah, blah, blah. They know that. It's
Yeah.
second nature to them. So that's how they speak.
Yeah. And the two's your character that's like serving everybody food
Yes.
as you sit down at the table. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Like the Molly Weasley is a 2,
Yep.
and Samwise Gamgee is a 2.
Mhm.
So that servant character, but really in a giving of themselves to the point of sometimes depletion.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, that's what you're going to see in a 2. And when they're unhealthy, they're also going to be digging for problems in your life
Mhm.
because they want to be able to solve them. So
Yeah.
when you seem down, they are there and they're, tell me about it. What's going on? Right.
Yeah.
A little too much concern because they want to, insert themselves as
Mhm.
your support.
Yeah.
So that's another thing. If they're like low average or unhealthy in the levels, that's how it'll come across.
Yeah.
So then should we move on to 3?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so type 3 is the achiever, and this is a type all about value. So whereas 2 is looking to be worthy of love, 3s are looking for their worth, just their worth and their value in this world. So their core fear is to be worthless and have no value, and their core desire is to have worth and value for the world and be able to deliver something. But it can look a little bit like they become the human doing rather than the human being, because they are using their efforts and their accomplishments. That is what gives them the tally mark in the positive column.
Yeah.
So their talk style, and this is probably going to resonate with a lot of people who have met 3s like this, but is persuasive or selling. So 3s are very image conscious because they are worried about what they're delivering to the other person. So they know what they see almost through the other person's eyes, but unlike certain types that can do that diplomatically, it's seeing themselves through other people's eyes. So they are always selling something. When they're talking, they're trying to sell you on it. When they are telling you about something that they've done, they're persuading you like, oh, this is a good thing. It's always like 3s I've talked to have said that they feel like they're always at a job interview. Right. And so it's
trying
really
to impress. Yeah,
exactly. And it's exhausting for them. They want to stop, but until they understand that's the lens they're looking through, they don't know the option. They don't know that other options exist. So they are selling you on things. They are natural salespeople, absolutely great at it. But so like when I need to do marketing, I talk to 3s because I'm like, what am I missing here? What link? And they can look at it from the buyer's perspective and immediately go, okay, you need to get them from here to here. Here's where you're failing. They are so good at marketing. So that's just a pro tip for any writers out there. If you have a type 3 writer friend, go talk to them. Mine is Brian Cohen, who I host Sell More Books show with. But so that is the natural talk style that emerges from their core fear and desires, that persuasion and that selling, trying to persuade people that they have value.
Yeah. So in their voice, you're going to have a lot of like their cadence is going to be multiple sentences at a time, or like the 3 is going to have that kind of like that persuasive desire to let you know. And then I think one of the things writers struggle with the 3 is ego versus not ego. So like 3s, if you have a narcissist character, the 3 lends really well to that, but 3s don't necessarily need to be narcissists. So just kind of playing with that voice a little bit, and when it comes up what they're talking about.
So the whole like temptation of the 3 is vanity, and it's just that result of seeing things, learning to see themselves through other people's eyes, so that they can make sure that they're presenting in the right way. But that can lead to that vanity of always thinking about their appearance.
All right, well, thanks for doing that. Let's pivot. So how are you using the Enneagram in your in the story alignment with authors to help them kind of align themselves with what they're writing?
Yeah. So what my process is when someone schedules, it's an hour call, but they have to fill out a questionnaire ahead of time. So we don't always end up at Enneagram depending on what their story needs. Sometimes we'll just kind of do a little mention of it. If they've got their protagonist, they've got their antagonist, then we're pretty much solid. But they'll do a questionnaire on, what they're struggling with, or if they want to level up, what they're coming for. It's a self-assessment. And then we do the 3 acts. I have them describe it. I have them talk about what the protagonist wants, what the protagonist needs. So I get all that like deeper information about the story. And from that, I can usually go, here's where things are falling apart, or here's where I can tell that they don't have the information they need. They haven't sat and thought about it. So we're just going to discuss that a little bit more. Or, here's an opportunity. They mentioned this random character up here. That's the character we bring back around that they need for this, missing piece. So I will go into the call with an idea of where things are breaking down, and just ask a few more questions usually. And then we start talking. And if one of the problems is, and this is pretty common, someone's starting a new series, they just had success off their last series and they're starting a new one. And they're like, oh my God, this is so much pressure. Like, I don't want to screw this up. Help me not screw this up. I don't know my protagonist yet. This was just a cool idea and I want to try it. So we'll get to know the protagonist a little bit, and we'll talk about that inciting incident at the start of the story and some of the natural themes for that character that would emerge. So then they can start to see sort of a series theme emerging and start to think of smaller book level themes that they're going to explore. And so we'll set up a series that way sometimes, or if they are just like, this ending is just not working. I don't know what's going on. I don't know how to end it. It feels wrong, but I don't know why. That's really where we can dig in, and I can look at their characters, their protagonists' Enneagram type, and say, it's because in this climax, you're having them do what you would do, not what they would do. Yeah. And then it's like light bulb moment, right? So we can usually fix whatever even the big problems in an hour, because they stem back to these, basic like spine of the story kind of issues.
Just out of curiosity, do you have authors change their character or change their plot? Like, what's the easier direction to go? Is it easier to be like, write your own type, or is it easier to be like, understand your character?
I am all for minimally invasive surgery.
Okay.
So whichever one it's closest to make the fewest number of changes, because there's no point in telling an author to change the whole thing, because they'll just give up on the book. Yeah. So it's like, you might as well just write a new book at that point. Super true. So if it is a character that has a protagonist that has a vastly different type from them, I'll try and look for some sort of connection, right? Because as you get deeper into the Enneagram, you start to realize that these types have these, stress and growth numbers, and, how they all kind of relate. I'll try to separate out for them over the call. Okay, this is this type, this is your protagonist, and this is you. So we're really clear, and we have that language. So they have better language to separate out the protagonist from themselves. A lot of the times the protagonist is so half and half between themselves and the type that they thought they were writing, that if it could go either way, I'm like, why don't you just write your type? Like, if you're starting a new series, just write your type for the protagonist. It's going to be so much more fun. Yeah. Like, you're on book 1, it's not too late. Just do it. And you're going to thank me by book 5, because it just makes all of the crisis points easier. Cause you can think, what would I do? What would be triggering to me? Right. And you can write to that. And there's no amount of like books you can write with the same protagonist character that's like, say, type, that's too much. I have 3 series now with type 1 protagonists, because that is where my brain is. And the keys just type themselves at that point. Yeah. So it's so much easier, and they can look so different. Yeah. Yeah. That is fascinating. And I wonder, I mean, I don't know if anybody's done study on this, but I wonder if we like to read our own types as well. That'd be a fascinating. I mean, I resonate with type 1 characters. Yeah. I don't know. That's why I watched Ozark. I watched the first episode. I was like, oh, Jason Bateman's a 6 in this. He's my boy. And that's what kept me going through the whole thing. It was like, right, you understand him, you see yourself there, deep level. You can sympathize much better with someone of your type, unless they go into those unhealthy levels, and you immediately hate them more than anyone. Yeah, like, but I get it though.
I'm like, oh, I
You
get
get
it.
it.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
And you're like, oh no, I could see myself doing this.
Yeah.
Oh, this is bad. Okay, I need to take this to my therapist.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's something to that readers do identify with their own type. So you'll end up with a lot of readers who are a certain type based on,
Yeah.
the characters they identify with. But I also think that there are periods of time where certain types come into vogue because their gifts are needed in society and people feel that. So type 1 is having a moment right now.
Yeah.
Type 3's had a moment for a very long time.
Yeah, it has.
With the achiever
hero's journey goes really well with type 3.
Right. And just the, sort of hustle culture that we are all living in. And 3's, so the United States has a type 3 overlay, which is just says that it values people based on the things that type 3's value, what they can produce, that sort of thing.
Yep.
And that's not all the time everywhere, right? You have to kind of take that with a grain of salt, but it's these cultural values that are shared, and families have overlays, states have overlays, communities have overlays, everything has, any group has that overlay. And so 3 was a big one because we were seeing that it was being viewed as ideal for so long. Yeah. And then as those problems started to come through, we saw a lot of type 3 protagonists having to deal with, okay, but they've, they have they're living their dreams, and then something happens and now everything's been taken away from them. Where is their self-worth? Right. And you see that a lot in like Hallmark movies still, right?
Yeah. Totally.
You see the woman who's hustling in New York City, and then, she has to go home and she's trying to figure out, well, who am I now that I'm not, now that I'm outside of just the product of my accomplishments. Yeah. So there's different ones. We're going to have a moment of, we'll probably have a moment of 8 before long. Cause it's very much that like, enough worrying about whether I'm right or wrong. Let's go burn this place to the ground.
Yeah. And the beauty of that 8 protagonist is the full-fledged self-sacrifice of like, I don't care what it costs, I'll burn it down because burning it down is right. Yeah.
Right. And I'll die trying. Yeah.
Yeah. Russell Crowe's Gladiator.
Oh yeah.
Strong 8. Great, strong 8.
And we will eventually back to the 9 because we have to.
Yeah.
Because after chaos, you need that 9 type. You need, Harry Potter was a 9. He very much everything. It takes everything to get that character to just do things, right? Yeah. You have to have a very stressful environment. Yeah. But ultimately, it was this rift in the whole world of that story that needed to be brought together, and it could only be done through the sort of self-sacrifice of the 9. Yeah. So that peacemaker for those listening, but every type gets its time when there's a deficiency, I think, and a call for the gifts of that type. Yeah.
The pandemic, the 6s were really ruling we rocked the pandemic. We've been prepared to lock down for our whole lives. This was exactly what we wanted. Just give me a reason to be afraid and close my doors. So talk a little bit about, so I watched your videos, engaged with your stuff, thought it was fantastic, and immediately went and jumped to your Kickstarter and signed on. So talk a little, your Kickstarter runs until July 22nd. This is going to go out on the 10th. So talk to the group a little bit about your Kickstarter and how to jump in on it. Yeah.
Well, I think it might be the 21st. I don't know.
21st. Okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah. But I don't know. I would have to go check. Frankly, I'm in a whirlwind with it. But
no, the 21st is better. You have less time than I said.
Sooner the better. There are little bonuses coming out every week or every few days that you can jump on. But okay, so the Kickstarter is built around this book that I've been writing, which is Reclaim Your Author Career. And that is an Enneagram approach to building a career that you love in writing. So that starts at the very highest level, and it's aligning all of the elements of your author career to you and your core desire and your core fear, and taking those into account so that you're not trying to motivate yourself with the wrong thing and running out and burning out. And you understand why you were doing the things you were doing, and you understand what the money you make can do for you emotionally. And so that you're spending it in a way that feels right. Because when you spend your money in the wrong way, it just disappears and then you still are miserable. But you can actually spend money in a way that brings you fulfillment. So that's the kind of stuff we're talking about here. So we start at the highest level of, once you know your type, we're looking at career values or creative values. So the things that matter to you that are non-negotiables. And a lot of people don't think of these non-negotiables. They just kind of go ahead and then they realize they have negotiated a non-negotiable and they don't feel great. And something feels off, right? So we want to look at those, and I break those down into writing motivations and money motivations. So we know both of those, because it's really important to separate out money from creativity and the process. It doesn't get enough discussion, because it's like, ooh, I'm making money off of my passion. Then suddenly you're like, I'm not passionate anymore. This sucks. And then it's like, yeah, I mean, why would you write if it's just for money? Like, no one gets into writing just for money. Go into finance if it's just about money, right? So we want to preserve those things, keep them separate in our minds, so we understand where things are going awry when they do. Not if they do, but when they do. Unfortunately, we're human. So under that, we go into persona and what you are giving with your persona, what you are expressing to your audience, and how you build that, and how you stay true to that. So you're not trying to, you're not seeing someone who is just doing a great job and you just try and do exactly what they do. Because if they're a different type, it's not going to work for you. And a lot of the really very online and on social media people with a ton of followers tend to be threes, because that is the natural progression of the three, right? They love the stats and they get very motivated by it. But a type 5, the investigator, is not necessarily going to be as motivated by it. So you have to ask yourself, what persona you're going to do and how you're going to build it. So once you know what that persona is, then you can start to decide what tactics to use and what your strategy is going to be for building that persona. So these are all of these levels are just decision-making tools for all of the, fire hose of information you get for indie authors, or, if you're doing traditional publishing.
Well, and it sounds like it's very much, you're trying to help authors tap into who they are to motivate themselves through the difficult work.
Because it is there's no easy way, but we're taking as much friction and as many bunny trails off as we can. Like we're trying to streamline this so that the energy you do have, whatever that might be in the world today, it is going in a very clear way towards something that is going to fulfill you, because you can't have a career if you burn out. Like that's how you stop writing, and how your career ends. You stop writing.
And coming to understand why you do, what is going to help you do what you do. Like, one of my series, I tried to write in a 3 style. I was like, I'm gonna fast publish this. I'm gonna run out a book a month. And it's the completion of one that's going to drive the other. I got 3 books in. I was completely exhausted. I had to step back and ask myself, like, as a 6, it's all about who am I writing it for? And so I was like, who am I writing this for? I was like, I'm not writing this for anybody. I'm just writing this to crank it out, but I don't have like a community around this project. So it didn't
exactly. I tried the 3 thing too, and it didn't work for my type 1. It worked for a little while because I can do all the discipline. And then I was like, I hate this. And I don't feel like the quality is where I need it to be as a little bit of a perfectionist.
I can imagine rushing things out as a perfectionist.
So I came to because I can do it like a 3. I couldn't do it where I put a book a month out and I just did one quick pass on the editing. I was trying to do it like a 3 where I put a book a month out and I did multiple really in-depth passes on it. And that doesn't work. So we're aligning that. We're aligning themes and protagonists as well in the main book. And then the Kickstarter, it branches out into all of my services. So you can upgrade, you can have, it starts at ebook, and then, it starts at Enneagram cheat sheet, but then you have the ebook. And then it goes, all the way through different courses. Right now, I think anyone who backs right now, because we've unlocked some stretch goals, is getting like $200 worth of master classes for, if you pledge at $10 or more. I didn't mean for that to happen. I thought it was going to take longer to hit those stretch goals.
I'm very excited it happened because I get those stretch goals now. So
so there's master classes in there. There's one-on-one consulting, there's group coaching, and there's even a retreat for anyone who's gone through all of it and really wants to just be around people who speak this language and to dive in very, very deep to their
Yeah, it is funny. People talk about how the Enneagram is a cult. And I think part of the reason that it is because once you feel seen, you don't want to stop being filled. You don't want to stop being seen.
Right. And the thing with the Enneagram is it's anti-cult. And that's why I like it. I watch a lot of cult documentaries.
Yeah.
And my greatest fear is someone controlling me and controlling my mind so that I do something that causes harm. Yeah. We ain't playing that game. So I've always been looking for answers to make sure that I'm in control of my decisions. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what the Enneagram does, because once we become more aware of our core fear and our core desire, we start to have these, it almost like trips, it's like a tripwire. When you feel like, oh, I really, really want that thing, you go, oh, wait a second. Is someone dangling that carrot for me because they want me to do something they want me to do? Or, is someone, your core fear gets triggered and you're like, oh, wait, this is my core fear. Wait, is someone doing this to try and like make me do their bidding or make me hate who they hate? So it's a tripwire. Self-knowledge is a tripwire to avoid being manipulated by cult figures.
Yeah. Yeah.
So and I keep having to check because I'm like, man, I'm so obsessed with this. And I just want to part of it is that I'm a reformer and we like to preach. Preaching and sermonizing is our talk style. So I want to go out and, share the word about the Enneagram. And I keep going, am I doing a cult by accident? No, I'm freeing people from cults.
Yeah. It's really funny. It's the language, I think, that gets people tied into oh, this is a cult, because you start talking, wings and motivations and fears and desires.
Oh yeah. And integration, disintegration, that's used so frequently in all these cult shows that I watch.
My stress number, my health number, it's.
But the thing that I know about cult leaders that I've learned from reading about them, from watching these things, is that they are masters of guessing someone else's motivation.
Yeah.
They guess it when the other person doesn't know it. And that's the problem. The other person is not in a, usually they're very vulnerable. They're in a disorganized emotional state, and they aren't aware of their own, core fear and core desire. But that cult leader sure as heck is.
Yeah. So for all you writers out there who are writing manipulators, there's your kid, right? Somebody who can guess. Yeah. Claire, thanks so much. I won't keep you any longer because we've been going for a little over an hour. So I appreciate the time. Besides signing up for your Kickstarter and going to check out FFS Media, is there anywhere else you want people to go engage?
You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Instagram, but it's all the FFS. www.ffs.media is where all of the hub is. So there's my fictions there, but you can also go and find all of my services. And then if you want to go straight to the Kickstarter, just kickffs.com.
Awesome. All right. I'm going to stop the recording and we can chat a little bit more.